It was decades ago when I was allowed to go on a nuclear submarine and visit with the crew and go to sea. This event was wonderful, and I've always said it's the most fun I've ever had being seasick. Well, this trip turned out to be rather eventful rather than uneventful. It turned out that once at sea, I actually became seasick, and it was usually the case that when the sub's on the surface, it rocks and rolls like you can't believe. After all, it's effectively like a large pipe with end caps on it, right? So it rocks and rolls. And so I became seasick. And during that time, I visited the individual who passed as the doctor on the boat. And he was a kid, way younger than me. And he gave me some medication. Actually, it was a patch that he gave me to put on. When I was trying to overcome my seasickness, I went over and sat in the sonar shack, it's called. Now, you have the folks that steer the boat. You've got the two gentlemen that drive the boat. You have the first officer, the executive officer, the captain, and they're in the main control room of the boat. And off to the side, if you're looking forward from the stern, off to the right side, on the other side of what's called the chart table, there's a row of screens, and those are the sonar screens, and they line the starboard side of the boat, which is the right as seen from the back looking forward. And so I sat down in one of the empty seats after asking the kid running the sonar if I could sit there. He says, "Yes, sir, you may sit there." I said, "Okay." And I didn't talk to him because he was busy looking at the sonar, tracking things. Now, it's true that once you submerge the boat feels like you feel right now, sitting in your room or place of residence. You don't feel much. You feel vibrations. You feel vibration coming through your feet. All right, but you don't really feel anything else. You don't feel the rocking and rolling anymore, as long as you go deep enough. And the boat felt no rocking and rolling. Okay, we'll put it that way. So, as we're going along, the kid on the sonar, the tech, is listening and looking at the screen, which is called the waterfall sonar. I couldn't read it. I mean, I did take some lessons on how to read it, but very inept, and I wouldn't even think that I could read it, and I wouldn't try. And so I'm sitting there, and I start to close my eyes because the patch is starting to do its work. It was some period of time since the patch got put on. And as I'm sitting there and starting to actually doze off, all you hear is the noise inside the boat, and it starts to become echoey in your head as you start to fall asleep, right? And that's the thing about these submarines. They're very loud inside. You hear high pressure air, whoosh, you hear people talking, blah, 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 okay? And it all blends into one white noise pattern in the background. Now, the pride of the Navy is that sound never makes it out of the boat's hull. And that's the pride of the Navy. Okay, they've gotten that down to a science. Well, anyway, as I sat there dozing off, all of a sudden, and it could have been some time after I dozed off, I don't know, the tech on the sonar yells, con sonar, fast mover, fast mover." And I jolt awake. My seasickness is gone, probably because of the adrenaline I was now feeling, because to me a fast mover meant a torpedo. And I was immediately regretting my decision to go for this quote-unquote ride on a submarine, when the fact was, I felt like I was going to die out here now. Well, the executive officer, known as the XO, comes around and he says, "What do you have?" And I'm sitting to the left of the kid at his station. He's, of course, to the right of me, and he's looking to the right of him at the executive officer, who's looking down at him from a standing position. So the kid's looking up at him and telling him things, and I was behind the kid's heads, basically, so I couldn't hear everything he said because of that noise I told you about. But he gave the executive officer the bearing and the range. It was a very short term trace, I guess, on the sonar. And then the executive officer said, "Well, how fast was it moving?" And I heard him say that because the XO was facing me. And the kid actually answered him and said loudly, in a way that I can't tell you how loud he was. He was very loud because he was incredulous. The kid actually had never seen anything like this before, you could tell. He held his hands out to his sides, and he went, "Several hundred knots, sir." And the XO looks at the waterfall display, the sonar screen, looks at the kid and says, "Okay," he said, "log it and dog it," which meant to me bury it, log it and then hide it. And the kid just responded, "Sir, yes, sir," went back to his console and started getting on with his work. Now, look, I'm a guest on this boat, right? I was invited to go for this excursion, and so I figured I would be forgiven for thinking I actually had some kind of special merit being on the boat. So I got up, Mr. Big Shot that I thought I was, and I went over to the XO. I said, "XO, I'm somewhat familiar with these fast movers. Is there anything I can help you with?" He looks at me and he goes, "D'Antonio, is that correct?" I go, "Yes, sir." He says, "You having a good trip so far?" I go, "Yes, sir." And he looks me right in the eye and says, "Let's keep it that way." And he turns and walks away. Okay, well, that put me in my place. So I basically felt, that's just not good. So I went and sat down thinking about this fast mover that they witnessed, that I basically was party to, and thought, this is real stuff. This is real. So I got off the boat. The XO nodded and shook my hand and said, "You have a good day now." I said, "I will. Trust me, I will." And that was that. A few years later, I had to do a job for the Joint Chiefs down in Washington. And I had an occasion to talk to one of the chiefs. And I asked him, "What can you tell me about the Fast Mover program, Chief?" And he looked at me and he could have said, "I have no idea what that is," or "I don't know, you tell me," or anything else. But instead, because apparently we work together, he looked at me and he says, "I'm sorry, Mark, I can't talk about that program." I think he probably heard me just stunned silence. You could hear my stunned silence. And from that point forward, I've known that USOs exist.